What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Today is Monday, which means Boxing Ego Monday Mail Day. Loads of great questions. If I don't get to your question this week, then ask again next week. And some Danny Garcia questions. Let me jump right into it. First question comes from Joshua Boyden. Hey, Ego, what do you think the chances that we see a Thurman versus Spence fight soon? When do you think it could happen? And do you think it should? If it does, who wins? Thanks, Josh. Now, I've kind of said my thoughts on this. I don't see it happening anytime soon based on one of the fighters saying he doesn't want it, and that's Keith Thurman. He feels that he's proven more, and he has for his resume. I still think it's a good fight, so I personally don't have a problem seeing it. My standpoint is pretty simple. If you're going to fight a Luis Collazo or a Julio Diaz or even a Leonard Bundu type of competition, then yeah, I would say fight Spence instead, because I'd much rather see Thurman fight someone who can possibly test him. But if you get a gig or an opportunity to face Sean Porter, Amir Khan, Kell Brook, Mayweather, of course, take those, Pacquiao, take any of the big names. But if it's not going to be a big name, then I think Thurman should most definitely face a guy like Errol Spence. Both undefeated, somebody's got to go. And again, I don't think it will happen, just more so because Keith Thurman, he keeps having clauses and stipulations. He recently said on the Garcia Malignaggi, they did a round table, and I seen an interview, and he was basically saying at some point, if I fight Errol Spence Jr., the winner must get Floyd Mayweather. And we know Floyd. Floyd's been in the sport 19, 20 years. He's not going to allow somebody, especially someone at the level of Keith Thurman, who is a good fighter, but he still has to earn his stripes. Like, you look at the top names at welterweight, you can't say Keith Thurman has the best resume at welterweight. So bottom line, I don't think Mayweather would let him dictate any kind of terms or establish the game plan or the plan. So to me, it just doesn't seem like this fight is going to happen as soon. I would love for it to happen. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And that's mainly because Keith Thurman feels he's better than this particular fight, or he's not, his sights aren't set on a guy like Errol Spence Jr., and he thinks Errol Spence has more to prove. But it's a good fight, and I would definitely watch it if they were to make this. Next question comes from Dave Briggs. After Danny Garcia's last few performances, do you think it's possibly time for a change as far as the trainers are concerned? What can get him back on track, looking like the Danny of old? Hashtag Boxing Ego. You know, I did my post-fight. Make sure you guys check that out. And I was surprised. I thought Danny Garcia would look a bit sharper. He clearly beat Paulie Malignaggi, but I'm a realistic type of boxing fan, I guess you could say, or I consider myself to be one. And I didn't really see what Paulie Malignaggi was doing. It looked like he was content surviving more so than had a good game plan. Like, it's not like he had a great game plan and it wasn't working because Danny Garcia was doing all these good things correct. So I expected a little bit more from Danny Garcia, given the Paulie that showed up after a long layoff. He just didn't look like he had it, in my opinion. So I expected him to look a bit sharper, especially since him and his team said, this is the weight for us. We were killing ourselves to make 140. So maybe Angel can bring somebody in. And that's the problem with the father-son relationships. It's very hard to fire your father. I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Shane Mosley had a falling out with his dad, Jack Mosley, when he switched trainers or something like that. And then, you know, Floyd Mayweather and Floyd Sr. had disagreements, and he was using Roger and stuff like that. So it gets a bit tricky in some gray area when you have your father training you, because again, that's blood, and it's hard to say, hey, I need to look for someone else to further my career when this is the person that got you started in boxing and took you and drove you to all the tournaments and stuff like that. So it's a little bit tricky, but maybe Angel can bring someone in like a brother Nassim Richardson, who's also based out of Philly, and give them both some pointers. I think Danny Garcia really, what I notice is he needs to work on his jab, consistently throwing a jab, and also work on his accuracy, because for the longest, from Eric Morales all the way to his most recent fight with Paulie Malignaggi, he misses like crazy. And again, if you're in with one of the elite guys, a good counterpuncher, even a Marquez type, those are mistakes that guys who are at that level, who have power or whatever, can make you pay for. So he really needs to work on shortening his punches. And if you're going to take the energy to swing, make sure you connect. So those are my tips and tricks or whatever for Danny Garcia. A new trainer wouldn't be bad, but I just don't see it being logical because of the father-son relationship. There's a lot of people like Robert Guerrero. I think he could do better if he got another trainer. You know what I'm saying? But it is what it is. A lot of these guys just stick to what they know and keep it in the family. Next question is from Obed Justi. Hey, Ego, can you give us your thoughts on Danny Garcia versus Pauline? I still see the same Danny. I really don't see him beating a Thurman, Brook, or even a Marquez. Also, I have a weak prediction game. Can you give me any tips on how to get an accurate prediction? And good question. I pretty much answered a lot of that in Dave's question. And I think Danny Garcia, he clearly was winning the rounds, but I don't think the best version of Paulie showed up. Not to take anything away from Danny Garcia, but with that being said, based on the Paulie that I seen that showed up, that didn't really have a game plan of how he was going to win with no power. It's one thing to not have power, but you can't have no power and not have a good game plan. And things that I've seen Paulie do in the past, like exercise a consistent, good, sharp jab, he wasn't even really committing to things like that. So based on that, like you, I expected Danny Garcia to look a bit sharper, especially being at a comfortable weight. So I kind of said it in the last question and in my post-fight. Check that out if you guys want more details on an official breakdown of that fight. But I expected more. I wanted to see more. Danny Garcia is much younger. He hasn't taken the punishment, a.k.a. been knocked out like Paulie Malignaggi. And Paulie Malignaggi didn't really look that game to me. So I still see some of the same mistakes, and like I said in the last question, he really needs to work on his accuracy. Like it's becoming ever so clear what style bothers Danny Garcia, and you don't want that. You don't want the MO to be out on you because it's open season. You're like, okay, if you use some lateral movement and make him work for it, he don't like this or he fatigues, and you don't want everyone to know the quote-unquote blueprint on how to beat you. Like you said, Thurman, Brook, Marquez, all difficult fights unless he really works on those things. He has a good chin and he does have power. His power looks like it transitioned well to 147, but he really needs to work on his accuracy and just be more of a precise person with cutting off the ring. Learn from Triple G or something on how to cut off the ring effectively with the jab and kind of corner your opponent so you don't have to miss like crazy. And the jab will help stabilize all of that. As far as the prediction game, to be honest, my prediction game, I watch a lot of boxing, and that's what it is. I watch a lot of boxing. I look for patterns. I look for habits. I watch past fights. Now, the difference between me and some people is a lot of people are either hot or cold. There's no lukewarm. There's nothing else. It's just one extreme or the next. So when it comes to predicting, everyone's a bum. If it's not a Cotto versus Canelo type of match, then they're a bum to you and they have no chance. And I really look at boxing from a realistic perspective, and I try not to do that because I read all kinds of fans' comments on my videos and stuff. People doing triangle theories that have no relevance, like, oh, Sean Porter, he knocked out Paulie Malignaggi, so Danny Garcia will. Sean Porter is big in an established welterweight, and he fights nothing like Danny Garcia. So I never even understood why people use these triangle theories, and they're not even taking fighters with similar patterns or styles or anything. So for me, I just watch a lot of boxing. I look for habits, patterns, and I kind of go off of that. And I try to be logical, I guess you could say. People are like, oh, Keith Thurman, Luis Collazo, it's a mismatch, and he's going to knock him out in the first round. When is the last time Keith Thurman knocked anybody out in the first round? So that's one thing. Just when you're doing your predictions, don't be extreme and really look at the situation. And I try to look at variables. And I told people that Collazo is a game veteran, and I didn't see him winning. However, he could pose some problems, and we've seen that in round 5. You got to look at the variables, like Keith Thurman, what's his height? Okay, Luis Collazo's pretty big too. He's about the same height. He's an inch taller. He's a southpaw. You got to consider all of these different variables when you're looking at who would win this fight. Same thing with Mayweather and Pacquiao. They're both good fighters, but the reason I picked Mayweather was because of what he does well and what Pacquiao does well. Plus, I look at both of their flaws, and I kind of break it down and go tit for tat. It's boxing; anything can happen, but usually my prediction streaks have been pretty good based on that, and just kind of looking at the game from a realistic perspective and not trying to be outlandish. And like I said, nowadays, if it's Deontay Wilder versus Eric Molina, people don't care because they haven't heard the guy. They don't do the research. Do the research. Find out that this guy had an 81% knockout ratio and that he wobbled Chris Arreola. You know what I'm saying? You got to do your research. He wobbled Chris Arreola in the round he got stopped in, and Arreola caught him while he was being too gung-ho, kind of like Pacquiao Marquez. So that's my advice for people. Do the research. Know what you're talking about and really break down the variables of a fight. Don't be a fanboy and say, oh, this person, he'll beat his ass because of this. Like, if you're picking someone, it's one thing to have your heart with a certain person, but to intelligently break down why that fighter would win, that's something totally different. Next question is from Dream Chasing Boxing. What are your thoughts on Triple G proposing a catch weight against Ward? Now, this is no Bay Area bias. I'm from the Bay. You guys know that. I've said this on several occasions. I made videos about it. And to me, it's clear as day. Team Triple G does not want the fight. Now, again, I'm not an outlandish person where I'm going to start calling people pussies and bitches. I'm not saying Triple G's afraid of Ward, but I don't think that him or his team want that particular fight because Ward would require them to move up, and he's a crafty veteran, Olympic gold medalist with a tricky style, period. When they could stick around, try to rack up some victories, it's going to be harder to beat Triple G, in my opinion, at middleweight, and they might be in line for the Canelo Cotto winner. So from a business perspective, I think that's what it is with Triple G. They were willing to fight Crawford or Chavez Jr. because they really liked their chances in that particular fight, and they didn't really see Chavez Jr. pulling the upset or being the spoiler and Triple G losing to Chavez Jr. pretty much, right? So they were willing to do that. But when it came to Andre Ward, that's a more difficult style. And even if you were to beat Ward, it would be probably harder to look great against him than it would be to look great against Chavez Jr. because Ward has a better defense and he's more overall superb fighter. So in regards to your question, the catch weight was proposed because they knew Ward would probably feel insulted by that and he wouldn't take it. He just fought his last fight at a catch weight of 172, weighed in at like 171 and change. So him coming down to 164 off of a long layoff and off of coming back to a catch weight and not feeling like he's the B-side, most likely they knew that was an offer that he would not take. It's just like pricing yourself out. That's like me saying, yeah, I'll fight Guillermo Rigondeaux. I want $4 million though. I want $3 million. I mean, anyone could say that, but I know I'm not going to get that type of payday for it. So it's a way of saying like, oh, we did our part, but you really didn't. You didn't really want the fight. So that's my thoughts on it. Next question is from Nick Christophus. Do you think SOG will ever fight Triple G? Thanks, man. Now, I think the fight can happen, but again, I think Triple G's team knows it's a dangerous fight, or it's a fight where Triple G may not look as good and destructive as guys like Gabe Rosado, Adama, Willie Monroe, and for that reason, they're willing to put it on the back burner and pace it out and make that in the distant future as opposed to right now because they know the implications of that particular fight. I do think the fight can happen, but we'll just have to wait and see. I think it can happen in the future. I just don't think it's in their immediate plans because they want to at least, as a business, cash out, fight a Cotto, fight a Canelo winner, something like that, unify a little bit more, and keep this undefeated knockout streak going, right? And that's another thing. That's a selling point for it. This is a business. That's a selling point for Triple G to say, hey, 20 consecutive knockouts. If he fights Andre Ward, and let's say he beat him, but it went to the decision, that ruins his knockout streak, right? But if he fights Lemieux, then based on their fighting style, there's a good chance that he could knock Lemieux out. Lemieux's not known for having an impeccable defense, things like that. So, again, if he were to fight a crafty guy, a veteran, an Olympian like Ward, and went a decision or something, or looked sloppy in that fight, that all those things play into his marketability, and that would end his knockout streak, which they're trying to grow and things like that. So that's my opinion. Next question is from Terrell J. I personally don't feel Triple G and Lemieux is pay-per-view worthy, but that's just my opinion. I'm happy the fight is happening, but do Do you feel that HBO is pushing Triple G to be a pay-per-view draw before he has proved he is actually a pay-per-view star? Now, that's a tricky question. I do think HBO is rushing it, but don't get it twisted. Triple G is really popular and he is a star. I think his style, it's suiting for like casual fans as well as just regular boxing fans. He does bring excitement, and number wise he's done pretty good on the West Coast and East Coast, which is hard to do. It's not easy, that's what I'll say. You have to be some level of stardom to do it. Like, you look at Terence Crawford, great fighter, one of my favorite up and coming fighters, but his biggest fights and like sellout crowds and stuff were back at home in Omaha, right? But Triple G, he's not fighting in Kazakhstan. He fought in New York, in Madison Square Garden, did good numbers there, sold out the StubHub, sold out the Forum. So he is a star. But as far as a pay-per-view, this is the difference. You're expecting Triple G to carry that, because David Lemieux, he's a clean-cut dude, and he's just not that big of a star in the States. I really don't think he is. I think a lot of people were first exposed to him when he fought at the Barclays versus Gabe Rosado. And his last fight, he fought Hassan Indam, which was a great fight. But HBO didn't even pick that fight up. It was competing with Ward Smith. I was live at that fight. And then Adrian Broner versus Sean Porter. That all happened on the same night, June 20th. And HBO didn't even air David Lemieux's last fight. So to me, if you're going to make a pay-per-view, it's always better to make a pay-per-view with two credible stars. Like Floyd Mayweather was moving through the ranks and up divisions, and he fought guys like Zab Judah before he fought Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya was the golden boy. That made sense. Oscar versus Chavez Sr., that makes sense because they were both, one was a rising star and one was the older star. Things like that. You look at even Sergio Martinez versus Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto did great numbers with Delvin Rodriguez, who's a no-namer, and he did great. He had the highest ratings that year, highest cable ratings. Sergio Martinez, people at least knew him from the knockout from the Paul Williams fight. That was a highlight reel knockout, as well as he had already headlined a pay-per-view with Chavez Jr. So to me, those types of pay-per-views make a bit more sense. This is a good fight, a good action fight, and they're both champions. So I think HBO is just trying to ride off the momentum of that. Like, oh, he's done good sold-out venues, and he's doing 1 million+ cable ratings. So let's test him out and let's see where he's at. So, I mean, that's really what we're going to do when he has this. But I don't know if he's ready for a pay-per-view event because, again, he has to carry the brunt of it. Because David Lemieux, it's a good fight, but I think a lot of people would stream or go to other people's house as opposed to a bunch of people independently getting it. And that's just based on the feedback that I've heard. But nonetheless, it's a good action fight. Next question is from B-Rad Grigg, a.k.a. Firefox87. Do you think Terence Crawford will become the avoided fighter at 140 pounds? Keep up the good work. I watch every video. Thank you for the support. And I do think Terence Crawford, I mean, you got to look at him. He's a highly skilled fighter, amateur pedigree, and in addition to that, he can switch from, he's ambidextrous. He can switch from orthodox to southpaw fluidly, and it's interchangeable. Like, oh, I'm losing as an orthodox fighter, and he can switch to a southpaw. That is very hard to do, and not everyone can do that. I've seen fighters, they're orthodox fighters, and they switch to southpaw for like 2 seconds, and then they immediately switch back. I mean, he could fight the remaining, like he could fight 5 rounds like Gamboa. Watch that fight. He could fight like 5 rounds orthodox and then finish the fight the last 3 rounds southpaw. That is very hard to do. So it just goes to show you what level of skill and ring IQ and stuff that he actually has. It takes a skill set to do that. You know what I mean? That's like being a pitcher throwing perfect fastballs with his right hand, but he can throw the same type of fastballs and all the same pitches, curveballs with his left. Not everyone is blessed with that ability to turn it on and off like Terence Crawford. So I do think he'll be avoided. I'd love to see him fight like the winner of Matisse versus Postal, but Terence Crawford's a real big problem. And see, this is the thing. Terence Crawford, he's not like a loudmouth and obnoxious like an Adrian Broner type. So Terence Crawford to me is more or less one of those guys where he doesn't have a name like Broner. Like if Sean Porter fights Broner or whoever fights Broner, they know they're getting a good paycheck from it at the very least, because Broner brings in a pretty good fan base and a pretty good crowd based on his antics. And I'm not talking about who's a better fighter. I'm just saying I think Broner is a bigger celebrity, bigger star, and it could be for the wrong reasons, but nonetheless, fighting Broner, it'll be a big event versus Terence Crawford. It might not be as big of an event, and you'll get embarrassed the same, if not worse, than fighting a guy like Broner based on his skill set. You'll probably get embarrassed worse if you're not at that level, and you're doing it for less money and against a lesser star. So yeah, I do think Terence Crawford will be avoided at 140, especially looking like he did in the Thomas Delorme fight and his skill set. Next question is from Josard Feroz. Best upcoming talents. Now, I've done several videos on Monday Mail Day, and that question's come up from different people. So I'll kind of recap some of the people that I have my eye on. And I'm going to keep it more or less the younger talents. I'm really looking at Nicholas Walters, the Axeman. I like what he brings to the table. Oscar Valdez is another person. I think he tripped in his last fight. I don't think it was a knockdown, but Valdez is one. Felix Verdejo is another fighter, Puerto Rico. Shout out to PR that I'm looking at. Anthony Joshua, I think he has the power to really make an impact in the heavyweight division. Who else is there? Amir Imam, he looked real good. I want to see him step up in competition. There's a couple guys out there. Vasil Lomachenko is somebody I really respect his skill set. Those are probably the upcoming talents that aren't really getting the level of exposure that I feel they deserve, that people should be watching for. I think those are all good people. And then, oh yeah, Errol Spence Jr. I can't leave the list off without Errol Spence Jr. I think he's another person as he steps up in competition. Like, to me, if he were to fight, people want to see him fight a name. If he fights like a guy like Josecito Lopez, I think he beats him easy work. You know what I mean? That's just my opinion. And then that would be a name. So maybe they can look at an opponents like that. Maybe even a Robert Guerrero, just to see him step up into a bigger name. So those are the upcoming talents that I got my eye on, that I'm really looking for, and I think they could do some pretty big things. Another person is Roman Gonzalez. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of guys, but those are the people that kind of stand out in a freestyle off the top of my head. Next question is from TJ Vlogs. Yo, Ego, you ever think about doing some type podcast or live stream type of thing where we could call in and talk about boxing with you? Yeah, I mean, I really think about a lot of different things and ways to improve the channel, different segments, and I try to keep it fresh and keep that interactive chemistry with you guys. That's why I started this Monday Mail Day a while ago, and I've been doing that pretty religiously. So you guys let me know if you have any feedback, any constructive like criticism or suggestions really on what would be interactive or what you guys would like to see on the channel. And I'm all for expanding and doing. I mean, you guys are the ones that put me in this position, so I would like to hear from you guys what you want to see, live stream or call in, what would be fun, and then we'd have to figure out the schematics of how it would work or what I can do on my end and that kind of stuff. But I'm all for the suggestions. If you guys have any, drop them in the comment section. Next question is from Roshan Chet Curry. Paulie stated that he thinks nobody in heavyweight history could beat Klitschko. He said that nobody would be able to get past the jab. What do you think? I can tell you right now, I disagree with that. I mean, in history, yeah, I definitely don't agree. I mean, who is he talking about? Is he talking about Vitaly, or was he talking about Vladimir Klitschko? Because I didn't hear this interview. I didn't see him say this or whatever. So, I mean, it doesn't matter. I think Vitaly's better than Vladimir Klitschko. So, I don't know which one he was talking about, but I don't agree really with either. Vitaly lost to Lennox Lewis, and that wasn't even a prime Lennox Lewis. That was Lennox Lewis's last fight. So I think a prime Lennox Lewis could have gave Vitaly a good fight. And then Vladimir Klitschko, he's a good fighter. He's very good, but he's beatable. And I think the Klitschko's, like Vladimir's always had a good jab, but he got knocked out by Corey Sanders, rest in peace. He got knocked out by Layman Brewster. He had a good jab even back then. I think he's gotten smarter with age and experience, and after those 3 knockouts and losses, he's refined his skill and maybe even improved his jab, but he's always had a good jab and he's always been tall. He just became more experienced as a pro. So I think if guys like Layman Brewster and whatnot have knocked him out in the past, I don't think that everybody throughout history would not get past the Klitschkos. That's just my opinion. I think Mike Tyson was very short, but I think prime Mike Tyson, if we're talking a prime Mike Tyson where he was using head movement, he found a way to get on the inside, and he was very athletic, and I don't really believe in Klitschko's chin like that. So I think that would be a difficult fight. Like I said earlier, Lennox Lewis, he was 6'5", so a prime Lennox Lewis, I think he already beat, out of prime, he beat the Klitschko, whether you think it was controversial or not. He still won. So a prime Lennox Lewis. You have Larry Holmes, Ernie Shavers. There's a couple people that, to me, George Foreman, I think they have a shot to beat Klitschko. So I don't agree with Paulie with that statement that both Klitschkos are invincible or whatever he was saying. I think anybody can beat, to be honest, but that's why we have different eras. That's just my opinion. Next question is from Abraham Lopez. What's the next possible matchup for the winner of Leo versus Mares, Quigg, or Frampton? I don't know. This is what I hate about boxing. There's so many politics. I don't know what can be made because this person's with this promotional company and this person's with this imprint. I think realistically, Leo Mares could possibly face Guillermo Rigondeaux. I heard he's trying to come to Al Haymon. That's a realistic one. Gary Russell Jr., since they're fighting at featherweight, he's the WBC featherweight champion after he knocked out Johnny Gonzalez. We haven't really seen him since, so no defenses. That could be a unification. Actually, I don't think there's a title for Abner Mares, Leo Santa Cruz. Actually, there is. They said it's a diamond belt or something. But either way, Gary Russell Jr. is a person that they could fight, or even a Carl Frampton. Frampton said he was pondering the idea of moving up. So those are all good fights that can be made. And I would love to see the winner face competition like that. Fights with like Nonito Donaire may be harder to make. Quigg is with the UK promoter, so I think they can make that. But they're trying to make Donaire versus Quigg. So if Donaire beats Quigg, I don't know if Quigg would really be in the picture. So those are some suggestions on who can fight. There's a couple players at 122 and 126. I don't know with promotional beefs and stuff exactly who, like a Nicholas Walters, could he face Leo versus Mares winner since it's Al Haymon and also top ranked fighter. But those are some suggestions that I have on who can fight. Frampton, Rigondeaux, Quigg, and Gary Russell Jr. And the last question is from ZP Goldman. Hey, Ego, this is my first time posting, but I love everything you post. Honestly, you're my primary source for boxing news. A couple of questions I've got for you. Well, I'm glad I could be of service in that you enjoy the videos. And for your first question, looking at how Freddie Roach acted during the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, do you think that he was as lethargic during Manny's training camp for Mayweather? For example, picking an MMA fighter with the same dimensions as Mayweather and a so-so record for a sparring partner just seems lazy to me. Why not try to find a ranked boxer that he thinks moves like Floyd or training? It's a good question. I'm surprised no one really brought that up. I thought about that too. I do think Freddie Roach was kind of lazy. He said he had a problem getting sparring partners because they were getting paid off. I don't know. I can't really corroborate if that's true or not, but he said that. But even still, there has to be someone out there. Like, he used like young fighters that lack the experience, like 21-year-old fighters for sparring partners. Now, that's good to bring some young guys in, but at the same time, it's hard to mimic a guy with 20 years, almost 20 years of pro-level experience with a fighter who just turned pro and is only age 20 or 21 or 19 or whatever that some of the fighters. And then I know the MMA fighter you're talking about, I think his name is Deshaun Johnson. I don't know why you brought him in. His boxing record is suspect, and his MMA record has losses as well. Now, it's not all about pro records, your win and losses. It's just based on what I've seen from him, because I did a little bit of research. I didn't really see anything that remotely resembled Floyd or that will help you. There's guys that they have wins and losses and stuff on their pro record, but they can still help you in sparring. Stylistically, I just didn't really see why he was brought in. What what ability he had to mimic Floyd. Like Maidana used Steve Forbes, which a lot of people use. I think that would have been a better sparring partner. They're both with top rank, so I would have tried to get a guy like Terence Crawford. You know what I mean? Al Heyman's not in charge of Terence Crawford, so if Al Heyman was paying off people or whatever Freddie Roach was saying, a guy like Terence Crawford, I know he's a celebrity and he's not really a sparring partner, but I mean, I would have tried to see, you know what I mean, give him a call, see if he's willing to do it. Other guys like Mauricio Herrera doesn't seem like too prideful. He's worked with Timothy Bradley. I talked to Herrera, and he worked with Timothy Bradley as a sparring partner. You know what I mean? Just different people like that. I would try to bring in anybody like that. Lucas Matisse, anybody. Bradley, anybody like that. Some of those guys will probably give Pacquiao, of all people, the time of day. It's not like you're just being a sparring partner for a nobody. I mean, it's Pacquiao. And then part 2 of your question, how likely is it Roman Gonzalez moves up to face Rigo or Loma? Also, who in Gonzalez's current weight, 118, I think could give him trouble? I don't really see him moving up to fight Rigo or Loma anytime soon. I just don't see it. That's just my personal opinion. And then Gonzalez is a great fighter, so it's going to be hard. I would say Brian Villora or Estrada would be the best chances to give him trouble. And then number 3, John David Jackson, in an interview on Fight Hype, said that Andre Ward makes 4 common mistakes that Kovalev would capitalize on. Whenever I see Ward, he looks pretty close to perfect. What do you think those mistakes are that Jackson mentioned? Or is Jackson just trying to scare Ward/Hunter? Thanks, and keep up the great work. Now, I didn't get to see the interview, so I'm just kind of going off of what you said in your question. So I don't know what John David Jackson is talking about, to be honest. That is a question probably better suited for him because he's the one that has the 4 common mistakes, and he's making it sound like it's a common knowledge type of thing. Like, I don't know. I really don't know what he's referring to. Not saying Andre Ward is perfect, because he's not. No fighter is perfect, but as far as like 4 common mistakes, I don't really know what he's referring to. Yeah, Darnell Boone knocked Andre Ward down, and then he adapted. He got back up. He's undefeated. He's an Olympic gold medalist. He's been in there with some great names, and he had a fractured hand in the Carl Froch fight, and he made the adjustment to still beat Carl Froch. So to me, I don't really know what he's referring to as far as 4 common mistakes. Like, if there's other fighters who, like Danny Garcia, I could tell you some common mistakes that he makes, like the looping, wide, slow clubbing type of punches, because they're more apparent, even though he's winning. But as far as, like you said, with Andre Ward, I'm not saying he's flawless or he doesn't make any mistakes, but I don't know what these common mistakes are, because he's making it sound like it's common sense that everyone should know these mistakes. So I really don't know what Jackson is referring to. It might be a scare tactic or whatnot. The Kovalev fight versus Ward, that's a good fight. It's like a 50-50 fight. Kovalev is menacing. He's a good boxer, and Ward would be moving up to 175. So I don't know. I'm not sure what John David Jackson is referring to, but that's a great fight. I would love to see Ward versus Kovalev if he's not going to stick around 168. So we'll have to wait and see. You guys let me know how I did this week. Monday Mail Day, another one in the books. Make sure you hit the like button. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.